Hey James, what's the name of that tour that Ice Cube and E40 are on together?
Yeah, I'm gonna know that one.
We welcome our man 1320 Kings Insider James Ham with us here to the show. James, it's
hammer time.
That's what we call it, man. Hammer time. It's game day once again. Let's start here. We saw Marvin the other night against Detroit. Luke said had to do with rebounding. One, do you buy that? Two, you think we see Marvin going forward? And by the way, young journalists never ask two questions in a row. You ask one, so my apologies.
I do it all the time.
I know. We're supposed to ask one question. Let them answer.
You're supposed to say it's a two-part question. That's John Dickinson.
That's very true.
The John Dickinson two-part question. Yeah. Okay. So I've already forgotten what the question was.
See, kids. That's why you don't do that. That's why you don't ask two questions. Do you think we see Marvin Bagley tonight?
I'm going to quote my good friend and former partner at Cowbell Kingdom, John Santiago, and just say showcase.
Cowbell played again.
Yeah, that was to me look, he could play again for sure. And we're seeing sort of a transformation where Walton is going away from all of the 3-guard sets and going back to more of a conventional set because he's not getting the rebounding. So there was a contract here between the guards and Luke Walton that as long as they rebounded, he would run 3-guard sets. The guards broke the contract. They stopped rebounding, and I think that's what we saw in the OKC game. That was, to me, the most glaring thing. I know I did my game recap for that, and so many people were upset that I gave Tristan Thompson props. And they're like, he missed a couple of shots. And I'm like, first of all, if you're counting on Tristan Thompson for offense and you already lost the game, that's just the way it is. But when I look inside and it literally is Tristan Thompson going up amongst 3 people every single time, fighting for rebounds, ends up with 10 rebounds in 16 minutes. The reason you lost that game is because every guard had 1 or 2 rebounds. They didn't get inside and help out. And so while Tristan Thompson didn't look brilliant, he also had guys draped all over him that should have been screened out already by the guards. You know, he can only take 1 or 2 guys out of the picture. So when it comes to Marvin Bagley, could he find his way into the rotation again? Sure. Lucas said that the entire time. I think it's going to come down to each individual team that they're going up against, what kind of players they have, and whether or not Bagley is a matchup that makes sense. The fact that he'd only played in one other game this season, I think that was telling. It was a lot about just the way things have gone behind the scenes and, you know, the fact that he's not really part of what's happening. But I thought Bagley looked rusty, and rightfully so. I thought that he played okay. But again, you know, he needs to figure out how this team plays. The team does not need to figure out how Marvin Bagley wants to play on the court. And that's going to be something that, you know, we'll have to keep a close eye on.
Hey, James, what is a showcase going to do in that situation? Like, I know maybe they want to see him in person, I guess, but everybody has synergy. Everybody has, league pass and the bare minimum. Like, they know he's not dead or he's not injured. Like, what would showcasing him do right now if that was the reason why he was playing?
I think it just shows him that he's healthy. He's healthy and he's ready to play. If you needed somebody, he's healthy and ready to play. Now, look, there is no straight swap here that makes a lot of sense for me. I know, like, Hamidou Diallo is another guy who's out of the rotation there. He's a 6'5", like 2'3", that could make some sense.
Actually, I like him
in some contract. Yeah, I think he's on a $5 million deal this year, and then he's got a team option for another $5 million for next season. And so that's at least somewhat intriguing. And I don't mind him either. I think he's athletic. He's fun. I don't know that he's a great defender. He probably needs some work all around. But like, look, that deal doesn't make sense for the Kings right now. I think there is a moment where Detroit could very well be a third team in a major swap, and Marvin could go there as a piece to that. to that deal.
Mhm.
But I just don't see the Kings aren't going to give up a $12 million trade chip that could be used for a much bigger deal to acquire a much bigger player than Hamidou Diallo or anyone else, Josh Jackson, or anyone else that you see on that Pistons roster that could be available. Now,
Mm.
again, they've got some big guys. If they want to start moving off of some of their solid veterans, then maybe it makes sense. But again, I don't see like a huge fit there in Detroit as a trade partner unless it's part of a three-way.
Are Marvin's minutes against Detroit the reason Mo Harkless wound up with a DNP?
Wait, say that one more time.
Are Marvin Bagley's minutes in that Detroit game the reason that Mo Harkless wound up not playing? There weren't just enough minutes to go around.
Yeah, I think we talked about that. I mean, Luke Walton definitely chose to go with Marvin Bagley over Mo Harkless for those minutes, and a lot of it is because number one, Mo isn't hitting the 3-point shot, so he's not spacing the floor at all. But then Marvin isn't really a knockdown 3-point shooter from the perimeter either. But I think the problem that Mo has at this point is he's not an assist guy and he's not a rebounder. And if you're getting killed on the glass and you're just, sort of counting on him to play defense, that's one thing. But I'd also you can crumple up that box score and just throw it away too. I mean, it's a Detroit Pistons. It's a bad team. It's a team that's not going to win more than, I don't think they'll reach the 20 game win mark. They might, but I mean, that's a team that you really can't overanalyze the game. You've got to look at it as just one specific moment in time, because if you blow that game and you lose to them, then all hell breaks loose and this thing spins out of control completely. But if you beat them, you also just can't pat yourself on the back. You lost 2 winnable games right before that. Now if somehow you can beat the Minnesota Timberwolves on the road, you come back with a 2-2 road trip. If it's 1-3, Thursday is going to be an interesting day. Friday is going to be an interesting day in Sacramento, I think.
NBA is tough if you can't shoot, can't rebound, or can't pass. it's tough.
But if you play defense, you can hide a lot of that, especially against teams that have players that, maybe.
Boy, he better be a really good defender.
Yeah. No. I mean, look at Thibault. I mean, Thibault averages 3 points a game.
No,
and he's a lockdown defender.
Really good, yeah.
And he doesn't do anything else either. So yeah.
Let's go through all the power forwards now. What'd you think about Metu starting the last 2 games, man? And I know it was against Detroit, and I agree with everything that you say about Detroit, but I don't know. I like what Metu brings to the table. I don't know if it's sustainable or if it's going to continue or whatever, but from what I saw, I like what he does. He's the stretch forward that people kind of talk about, right?
Yeah, I like him. I mean, look, what he has to do the 10 rebounds. He doesn't have to have 10 rebounds every game, but he has to take some of the load off of Richaun Holmes and Harrison Barnes on the rebounding numbers, and that's why he's in there. But I'll also say the reason why he's in there over Marvin Bagley is, number one, he's got a ton of bounce right now, and Bagley just doesn't seem to have his bounce because he hasn't been playing, and he's not getting a lot of practice time or anything like that. But the other thing is that, Chimezie is ready to fire. It's crazy. He looks like Terrence Davis out there. Hey, oh look, the ball's in my hands. Now it's not. It's like, hey, all right, you're ready. Let's go. That's what you need. The problem this team has is that they don't have any spacing for De'Aaron Fox to do his thing. Teams are collapsing the lane, so Richaun Holmes can't get in the pick and roll. All of a sudden you have one extra shooter on the floor and you see how it spaces everything out. Dave Yeager used to tell me, he's like, Anthony Tolliver is fine. He's a player that we brought in. This is what Dave was saying. Look, we brought in Anthony Tolliver because he's got some leadership and he can shoot the 3. He's like, do you know how much better the numbers look with Anthony Tolliver on the floor? Even though he's not some special, exceptional NBA player, just because he can stand in the corner and hit the 3 from the 4 position. His ability to space the floor changes everything that we do. And so that's what Metu's got to do. And I love it. I mean, just standing there, waiting in the corner. All of a sudden, he showed us he can shoot from the corner, because that was my concern after the first game. Everything was from the elbow. Now he slid down to the corner. That makes his team really, really dangerous with another shooter on the floor.
You talk a lot about offense and spacing and different things like that. Is offense a bigger concern for you right now than defense?
Well, I mean, I think good defense leads to good offense. Good offense leads to happy players who play defense. So I think that's always been the problem that I have with this.
Kenny, is that true?
Facts.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, when guys are full, when they're hungry, you're gonna have them make poor decisions on offense. When they're full, they usually settle in and play defense. And so that's what you have to find, the happy medium, the balance between all of that. And I think that's part of what the Kings, like, how many times are our teams getting wide open, run out, live ball turnovers? We keep hearing the live ball turnover thing. Well, the Kings aren't getting any live ball turnovers themselves. So they're committing live ball turnovers, but they're also, this season, we watched this summer league team, and I know it's just summer league, but the identity of that team was 15 steals per game. Well, the Kings are in the bottom 5 in the league in steals. So that's something, that's another way in which guys all of a sudden look up at the scoreboard and they're already at 10 points and it's the second quarter, because they got a couple of easy ones on the break. And if you're not getting those, again, now you have this scramble. Guys are looking for their numbers. Guys are trying to, do their thing, but they're just not getting enough touches. And like, create some touches for yourself. I watched a G League game. Nemias Keita ran out and picked a ball off that was going to the top of the key and went coast to coast for a hammer. That's a 7-footer that, is clearly working on his body. Like, that's what you need. Every once in a while, gamble for a ball, get up the court, go dunk. That's how these players, it energizes everything that they do. And I don't think that their defense has been better. The rebounding has been poor, which then leads to more defensive sets, which then drags your defensive numbers down. So if you can become a better rebounding team, your defensive numbers are going to go way up. And then also, if you can start getting some live ball turnovers, it's going to lead to more offense, and it's going to increase your pace, and it's going to do all the things that this team wants to do. So I think it's all part of one big giant puzzle.
Wow.
Kenny was defensive player of the year every time he was 10 of 13 from the field.
Oh, that's facts. I'm slapping the ground Duke style, after I get a bucket. After I don't get the ball, I'm just like, help.
Yeah.
Luke Walton, the other good, I won't say good thing, but just something that we notice is he's still tinkering with the lineup, right? Not necessarily the starting lineup, but the rotation. It's 1 week we see him just go 8, the other week he's searching for other guys to put in there. How is the process with that, James? I mean, when do you think this team might actually settle into, hey, these are the 9 guys that are playing. Everybody kind of knows their role and knows the minutes that they're going to get on a night-to-night basis. How long before we get to that point?
I think it's when you have 9 guys who step up and deserve to play every night. I mean, that's the way it goes, right? And like, I would like to say that it's just, they need more time in the pot. Well, hey, look, we're entering game 15. This isn't like the end all be all, but it's something I wrote today. When your 14 game sample size that we're looking at, it looks very similar to a bunch of 14 game sample sizes that we've seen from the last 15 years, then you got a problem. So while the sample size is too small for the 2021-22 season, it sure does look like so many other seasons, and that's a problem. So like, let's be proactive here. Let's figure out something. Let's give a guy like Chimezie, who's worked his behind off every single day. He's been in Sacramento. He spent the whole summer here working. He went and played for, his country's national team. He's a guy who's done the work, who's trying to get better, who's showing you something every single time that you give him an opportunity, whether it's in practice or in a game. Let's reward a guy. Let's see what we got, because Luke Walton found that with Rashawn Holmes. And if he can find it with Chimezie Metu, all right, that's fine. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to get upset if somehow Marvin Bagley finds his way and he's averaging 18 and 10 the rest of the season and the Kings are figuring out ways to keep him. That's fine. As long as what you're doing is successful and is leading to wins, go ahead and tinker until it's right, because at, what are they, 6-8? That's not right. You need to be better than that. And I think they know that. And you need to figure out a way. Like, 500 is a nice number. 500 is a marginal basketball team. Is it good enough to maybe get you in the play-in? Maybe. But that doesn't show the type of leap that all of us are expecting in order to start setting up for what's next. Like, how does this team not only get to the playoffs once or the play-in once, how do they become a playoff team every year? How do they become a team that moves up into the 4 or 5 seed and then somehow finds their way up higher than that? You've got to start building something, and it can't just be like a micro focus on, hey, let's get back to 500, because that's just, in the end, it's not good enough. And I think that's part of the equation. Like, does Luke stay? Does he not? You got to prove that you're not just like, you didn't just make it to the 10 seed.
Yeah.
You got to prove that you're on a path that leads to somewhere else.
Kenny and I forgot to mention this earlier, so I'll ask you, anything to read into Buddy Hield changing agents?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he worked with her before.
Okay.
So, yeah, I can't remember her name at this point. But Rob Pelinka, she worked with Rob Pelinka, and that was Buddy's agent before, which is also Kobe's agent before he joined the Lakers front office. So I don't think that there's a lot of like weirdness there. And like, look, Buddy's under contract. There's nothing he can do. He's got 2 more years after this year. He's not going to be able to force his way out of Sacramento and until, he becomes a problem, which he hasn't been, then I wouldn't look too much into it.
Diana Day, by the way, is her name.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Day.
Diana Day. Yeah.
What have you heard about Buddy, if anything, about how this season is going? I mean, between him and the team, is he cool with where he's at with this team, this role that he's playing in? Is the team not, are they water under the bridge? We tried to trade you, but you're here. Let's work this out. What are you hearing about their relationship between the team and Buddy Hield right now?
Luke has made this point so many times this season. He said, look, the Marvin Bagley situation and the Buddy Hield situation are so different. Did Buddy say, hey, I wouldn't mind being somewhere else this summer? Maybe. Did the Kings have him packaged in a deal to the Los Angeles Lakers? Yes. So, like, we knew where this was going with Buddy Hield. It didn't work out. They had really legitimate conversations and said, look, this is what we need you to be and who we need you to be. And Buddy said, I'm in. I get it. Let's do it. As long as I get, the minutes, as long as I get the shots, then let's do it. I'll try to be the best I can be at the position you need me to be. And I think that was a grown-up move by Buddy Hield. And it's why they haven't hit some panic button and just shipped him somewhere else. And I think he's been really solid. I also think, they have Buddy Hield like 2.0 sitting on the bench, and Terrence Davis, who can't get off the bench because, he hasn't been able to find a rhythm. And so you do have like a backup plan there in case a deal does come up where it's like, all right, buddy, we found the spot where you can go and maybe be a starter, or maybe you'll have a role on a playoff team. And, we wish you well. And you can slide Terrence Davis in and sort of eat that role that Buddy's been playing right now. But yeah, I think Buddy's been really good behind the scenes. That's everything that I've heard, even in private conversations. They're just like, he's one of the hardest workers you're ever going to run across. He's obsessed with the game of basketball. He wants to be great. This is what he does. And so he's ready to push forward after, a season where he was off for sure.
Mm-hmm.
1320 Kings insider James Ham with us here on D'Lo and KC. We're going to step out. We're going to come back. James Ham is going nowhere. We've got more Kings basketball to talk about as it's game day. It'll be the Sacramento Kings and the Minnesota Timberwolves tonight. We'll talk about that when we return here with more on Sacramento's #1 sports station, ESPN 1320. Take a shot.
Take a shot. I'll be right back.
Oh, woo. Man.
Yeah. So, Damian, I'm not cutting out.
No, you're not cutting out at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I text Jesse a note. He said, yeah, there's no sound issues at all. Sometimes it's more of like sometimes there's an internet connection thing where for whatever reason, if like two voices go at once, one will fade down a little bit. But yeah, there was no cutting out on the air at all.
Okay, cool. Because I'm getting like a little lockup here and there from both of you guys. Yeah. So
yeah, you didn't cut at all. You didn't cut, and I guess we didn't either. So
sweet. Awesome. Yeah. So I just wrote. I sent you that over just so you could like. It's an interesting discussion piece.
Yeah, I got it pulled up here, and I sent it out or retweeted it through the social channels as well. We'll probably go. We can go here with Luke. Is the paywall up yet?
What
for the Kings Beat?
I haven't locked everybody out yet, but yeah, I mean, paid subscriptions are there if people want to jump on board and do it. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't started locking stuff yet. I wanted to give it at least a month, and I haven't hit the month yet. I think I'm close, but yeah. And then I will definitely we'll look at, what I'm going to lock and what I'm not, as far as pods versus writing and stuff like that. So yeah, it's good. It's funny on occasion, because I'm not writing every single day, all day long, I feel like my brain is fresher to write, longer form and more creative stuff. And so it feels good. That's for sure. Sometimes I feel like I'm not writing enough. Sometimes I'm writing too much, but yeah, I got to find the happy spot here.
Yeah.
David asked Ham, let's see. Where was that? Ham, tell us your favorite Matina story.
Oh boy.
David, I will tell you my favorite Matina story while we're on this, but not on the air. When NBC decided to no longer have the position that I had, they did not tell Matina that, which they have a partnership there, and she decided to come over and was very upset. And so while I've had plenty of small conversations with Matina, that one was one where she was very passionate and angry about what was happening. So that's my favorite Matina story.
You told me that privately. That's pretty awesome. Because most people, I think Matina is like this weird Tyrannosaurus Rex character that just destroys everything. They have this weird perception of her, which is solely based off rumors.
All of it's based off of rumors. Yeah. I mean, rumors and innuendo for 15 years, but yeah, I'll just say she walked over and looked me square in the eye and said, "What in the F just happened?" But she didn't say F, and I'm like,
yeah.
So yeah, I think that she might not be as bad a person as people make her out to be. Yeah. I also flew on a flight with her son Constantine to New Orleans.
He's cool.
Yeah, he is.
He's a good dude.
And we had a good time. Yeah.
What the hell are you guys talking about?
Matina.
Chill.
Hey, and just so you guys know, John Bull, shout out to John Bull, who got me into CCIV, got me buying car stock in January, February, March, which became Lucid, which hit like crazy over the last couple of days and jumped from I don't know, my buy-in's at 25 for my average buy-in, but jumped to $58 a stock.
Wow, he didn't let us in on it. Hang on, James.
Yeah.
This has definitely been the most eventful day of commercial breaks over on Twitch and YouTube. James telling some extra stream-only stories over there. Apparently, John Bull's giving out investment tips, but only to James.
Yeah.
I didn't get them. I know James added another wing on to the Hammer compound out there, and is it Auburn? But yeah, no, just I guess John Bull just kept that between the two of them, so they're reaping the benefits of that. Again, it's a whole different show over on Twitch and YouTube, and it's cool, John. I'm sure you love us, to a certain degree too, but it's really nice, that you love James enough to,
both
get
of you
the
guys
bag.
both of you guys can go to crypto.com arena.
Yeah, I think the plan is to make as much money as possible on an electric car stock, so then I can buy a car that I want to buy. I won't make enough money to buy one of their cars, but I will definitely make enough to hopefully.
Do you have? I just thought of that. Do you have an electric car?
I don't. To be honest, like we were going to buy a Tesla because my wife is an attorney. I think I've said that enough on the podcast and everything else that people should know. My wife is an attorney, and she commuted to Sacramento every day for like 8 years. But her work decided that they no longer need anyone to come to the office. So while we were going to buy a Tesla, it became almost like, okay, do we need to? So probably still need to, but a lot of times I drive, I'll get
You drive
killed
a
for
lot.
this. I'll drive a minivan. I'll drive the minivan to work because it's comfortable and I have a bad back. And then, we have a commuter car too, but it's more my son's at this point.
When you catch that minivan rolling up to the G1C, baby, that's James Ham right there.
Heated seats.
James, you wrote about Luke Walton over at the Kings Beat, and you said something a minute ago. We should elaborate. It's the Kings and the Timberwolves tonight. But you mentioned you said if the Kings lose, it could be tomorrow could be an interesting day, Friday could be an interesting day. Like, is that where we are now with that athletic report being out there and the cat kind of out of the bag? Are we just watching losses? Are we just waiting for Luke Walton to be fired?
I don't think so. I think what we're waiting for is bad losses that could lead to that. We're waiting for the moment where you sense something's wrong, where you sense something that the team is completely let go of the rope. Like that's the problem with this team that I have. And like I wrote about it just, I just posted a little while ago. And the thing that I just want to point out to everybody, like, the fire Luke Walton crew that's out there. Well, like most of the main core of this team is the same group. Like, you're not just going to keep running this same group out there and saying, oh, it's got to be the coach. You're not going to do it. Eventually, this group is going to have to go too. Some of these big players that people have fallen in love with, well, they're going to have to find somewhere else to play, because if they can't get if they can't get to the first round, let alone get through the first round of the playoffs, then, eventually you're going to have to mix it up again. And so for me, like bearing Luke Walton's fine. But, I made the Edgar Allan Poe reference, the tapping, it should be in everyone's ear, not just Luke Walton's ear at this point. Everyone in that franchise should be looking around like, okay, this is about to get uncomfortable. And you're going into Minnesota. That team has so much talent. They're like, and if you want to be frustrated as a Kings fan, go look and see what's happened over there. They made the playoffs one time with Jimmy Butler, but outside of that, it's like 20-something years of futility with one win. Just like the Warriors, didn't they have 18 years where they made the playoffs once? Yeah, that Minnesota team is, they got a couple of number 1 overall picks, a number 2 overall pick, and they can drop 150 on anybody, and they can give up 170 if they're going to score 150. That team is a mess as well.
I can't remember. I'm trying to think if we broke this down before. when the Kings play on Monday? Maybe we did, but I'm still trying to figure out why this even came out. You know what I mean? Like, what was the benefit of this type of information coming out? Because like Damian said, we're just going to be looking for the next bad, or like you said as well, we're looking for the next bad loss and wondering, is this the straw to break the camel's back? It does nobody any good, I feel, to have that out there publicly. I'm just still baffled on how this became something that Shams and Sam Amick were able to report on.
You know, it's crazy. We had Amick on the Kings Beat podcast just a week before, and we had a discussion, me and Sam, where we both had been hearing kind of the same thing, that everything is totally fine. Like behind the scenes, Luke has got the ear of the team, but he also has the ear of the front office. Everyone is moving together, moving forward together. And so to have that come out, but see, that's always a problem with information like that. It's why I didn't rush out and write like a big, long reaction piece like instantly. I wanted to sit on it, think about it a little bit, because that information can come from so many different sources. You know, it's not just that we know exactly who said that to somebody. The line itself, the one word that's used in peril, like that's a word that I haven't seen that often. I'd almost want to do a Google search and see where it was used in relations to other coaches and see if it's somebody's catchphrase for something, and then sort of start doing the investigative work backwards to see where that came from. Because that's what I hope the fans do this. I know they don't for the most part.
They definitely don't.
But I hope they do this. I hope they look at every single bit of information that comes out and then do like the what is the little Zach Galifianakis where he's going like this and little numbers are going all through his head. I hope they do that with every bit of information, because you need to be able to see, like, track this stuff, track it, look where it comes from, see the validity of it. And I'm not questioning Sam, because I know he got a good source on this information, but you need to be able to say, okay, I can put 2 and 2 together and start to see where this is coming from, because that will tell you the strength of it, the strength of the information that you're getting, and the motivation a lot of times behind it, because that's where you also get it. Like, is it a player agent? Is it a coaching agent? Is it front office personnel? Is it another coach? Is it, like, there's so many different pieces that could be saying something. And so I think that's what I hope the fans start doing, maybe, is give every little bit of information like a grilling, like look at it, dissect it, figure out where it comes from, figure out what it sounds like. Where have you heard this before? Because those things really do help when you're tracking these things. And it also, like, that's what I do every single time. Like, okay, let me do the math here. Let me figure out where it came from. And then that helps me on my adventure when I'm writing and trying to be balanced and trying to, like, dissect what I'm doing.
It would have been easier if the Athletic report said, they just don't see Walton as a jazz conductor. Perhaps might have been a little bit easier to narrow in on the source of the information right there. I just hate that this is out, because I feel like the fan base is already split on Luke Walton, and I don't think rooting against Luke that doesn't do anybody any good. Like, because if we're rooting for Luke to be fired, that means the team is losing. But Luke is getting fired if the team is losing. He's not getting fired if the team is winning. Right. And that's the difficult thing about these reports that being out there. And I understand everybody's angst and everyone's antennas being up, with the Kings had losing 4 in a row at that time, especially when we had expectations of this road trip to go a certain way. It's just like it's out there now, and like, yeah, like this game is interesting tonight for a number of reasons. Minnesota and Sacramento are competing for the same exact play-in spot. They're in the same exact tier. They're going to be lingering around each other the entire year. But if the Kings fall badly short, it's, going to spend the entire night with my phone in my hand waiting to hear from you.
Yeah.
Waiting for that text from James, like, oh, it happened. All right.
That's the thing. Like, once if that does happen, right? Let's just, like, that's not the first and only move. I mean, that's the first. That's not the only move that's coming. Because once that happens, you're admitting that there's a good chance the season's over.
Oh.
And then you're like, okay, well, maybe Alvin Gentry can step in and steady the ship. It's like, okay, but wait a sec. I mean, Alvin Gentry's been there for a year and a half. This is Alvin Gentry's offense. So what's going to be different? Just because he's a different person telling them to do the same exact thing? He's the same guy. He's standing there on the sidelines telling them to do the same thing already.
Right.
So what makes you think that this wouldn't be an admission of like waving the white flag? I mean, I think we saw it with Atlanta, where you had was it Lloyd Pierce lost his job, and then Nate McMillan stepped in. And just a sidebar, Nate McMillan was on the very top of Vlade Divac's list a couple of years ago before Dave Yeager became available. The Kings liked him and were high on him coming into through that. So, but again, you're looking at a guy who's bounced around the league and done different stuff. But like those situations where a guy steps in and all of a sudden it becomes this magical ride, like that doesn't happen very often. And, again, I like Nate McMillan as a coach. He was my favorite of everybody because he had taken a long time off after the Portland job. But finding a guy that just steps in and all of a sudden it's perfect and it works out, it really doesn't. More often you get the Ty Corbin situation where he goes 7-21 and things completely fall apart. And, again, he could have gone much worse than 7-21, but they let him go and went with George Karl. And we had 3 coaches 1 year. Like, just try to avoid the mess at this point. I hope that that's what they would do. And I hear people out there say, oh, well, throw Bobby Jackson in there, throw Doug Christie in there. Like, Doug and I are super close. I would never want to see Doug put in that position. He's just not there yet. Like, and he will get there as a coach. I guarantee it. He works harder than anyone in the biz, but that's a really good way to just burn another one of your legends to the ground. Your guys that you love being part of your community still. That's a really good way, because finding success in this situation is going to be very difficult if you decide to sever ties now.
Real quick, Casey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry this is old too, but can you clarify this for me? Did Vlade want Dave Yeager?
I don't think he did not want Dave Yeager, but Vlade had interviewed, I think it was 12 coaches. Of those 12, I think he'd brought 6 of them back for second or third interviews. He had a list that was dwindling down. A phone call came in, Dave Yeager became available. And from what I know, that decision was not Vlade's. It was someone above Vlade, and that Dave Yeager was hired. And I think, it's a good question because it plays into what happened next. Right. And so Dave Yeager became the head coach of the Kings. Him and Vlade had some good moments, but they also did not have good moments beginning in Yeager's 3rd season when the Yahoo piece came out, right? That even though Dave Yeager had the team winning and it was such a feel-good story early in that last season with Yeager. But even though that was happening, Dave Yeager's job is still on the line because he's not handling the Marvin Bagley situation well or something, whatever it was. Well, that severed the relationship between Dave Yeager and Brandon Williams behind the scenes. Vlade, who is the ultimate peacemaker, was never able to get those two on the same page at all, ever. Like it was not good at all. Like there's some crazy stuff that happened. Brandon Williams wasn't allowed in practice. He was not allowed at shoot around at all. If he showed up at shoot around stopped, and he was asked to leave. So again, I just want to tell people, like, Dave was not Vlade's guy initially. Vlade had other guys. Vlade didn't have one singular guy, though. And where this plays into what happened next is everyone in the league knew at the All-Star break that Luke Walton was on his last 2 months with the Los Angeles Lakers. Everyone knew that he was not going to be back the next season, and that there was also a good chance he was going to be the head coach of the Sacramento Kings. So when I hear people say, well, Vlade didn't even interview anyone else for the job, it was 3 years earlier. He interviewed 12 people. He already had a list. None of them were quote unquote his guy necessarily, but there was a list and he'd already interviewed a bunch of people. And then somebody else was hired for the position that wasn't his first choice. The next time around, he had his guy. He knew he was going to become available. He was let go the day after the season. Dave was let go the same day. 2 days later, he's a coach of the Kings. That's how that went. Vlade was not going to mess around. He knew exactly who the guy was that he wanted. He thought he was on really, really stable ground because they were coming off a 39-win season, and it looked like they were heading in the right direction. He thought that they would be building on that with Luke Walton. It didn't work out that way. Many reasons why it didn't, but I think the whole Vlade didn't interview anybody. That's why, because he already knew sort of the process. He'd gone through it 3 years earlier and realized that if he had a guy that was his guy and he needed to make the decision and jump on it and be decisive and have it work out the way that it did. And whether that, I mean, it ended up not working out for him, but I think that there's way too many things to throw in the mix there. I mean, again, if there was never a bubble, I don't think Vlade would have lost his job, and he would have been back last season, and and this thing would have been much different because then Bogdanovic is back. A lot of things would have been different.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. You got me going down memory lane again, man. I'm going down it. But you know what, James, me and myself and Damian, we talked about this earlier, and it's really so bizarre why this team hasn't been able to have any postseason appearances in the last 15 years. Because I know, people talk about, what goes on, Vivek, how it's ran or whatever the case may be. And they say, well, they don't do that in Miami, or they don't do that in Golden State. They don't do that in San Antonio. But they do this stuff in Memphis. they do this stuff in Houston. They do it in Phoenix. And they found a way to somehow get past that and get to the postseason once or twice. They do it in Minnesota, but even once they've been able to get into the postseason. And it's maddening and it's frustrating, and it's easy to say, it's ownership's fault and they don't handle stuff. But yeah, a lot of times we're talking about championship. Damian made the point, the teams that are trying to tank stumble into the 8th seed every now and then by accident. And it's just so bizarre that through different leaderships, different front offices, they're still in this spot 15 years later, man. And I think the weight of that can be felt throughout this fan base, clearly throughout the organization. And sometimes I think it even trickles down to the players. And once they realize after a year or two, whether it's Fox or Halliburton, what they've stepped into, I think they feel that weight a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we look at this and you really pull back, it's just a series of just really, really small misses or really, really big mistakes. But at the end of the day, that one mistake leads to one mistake. These little tiny misses, though, again, we talk about the bubble. If the bubble doesn't happen, Vlade doesn't get fired. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he gets fired either way, but there's a good chance he doesn't.
I think that performance in Orlando was a big catalyst for him.
It was a huge catalyst. It was a huge catalyst. But my point is that if Bogdanovic is back on that team last year, and we got to play hypotheticals, and you still draft Tyrese Halliburton, this team missed the playoffs by how many games last year? 2 to play in. Okay. And you don't think Bogdanovic would have made that much of a difference? And then what if he would have brought back Alex Len? What if he would have said, no, I will not sign Hassan Whiteside, and brought back Alex Len? That team is at least 1 or 2 games better. And then if it's like, okay, Kent Bazemore, what if Kent Bazemore's back? Or what if we do something different? Like, that's where you're looking at. It's always just a little smidge, just a little bit of missed opportunity. But let's go back the year before. What if the whole situation never happens between Brandon Williams and Dave Yeager, and Dave Yeager's back for a 4th season? Mm-hmm. Does his team make the playoffs? Probably. They probably do make the playoffs. Let's go back to Michael Malone. Before DeMarcus Cousins got viral meningitis, this team was pacing to be there. He misses 10 games, which was a godsend for Pete D'Alessandro and that crew, because it gave them the opportunity to fire Michael Malone. If that doesn't happen, there's a good chance that some iteration of that team would have made the playoffs. And so it's not one decision that always causes it's not just the Kings passed on Luka and they would have been a playoff team. That's probably true. But at the same time, there are like 8 different instances of that exact same thing. The Kings don't draft Thomas Robinson. They draft Damian Lillard like they said they were going to the night before. Then that team, Damian Lillard and DeMarcus Cousins playing together, it doesn't, they would have made the playoffs eventually. So again, like in order to get a 15-year playoff streak, you have to be bad, number one, but you also have to be really unlucky. You have to miss all the time, because the Phoenix Suns, they've missed so many times. They've missed so many times. I mean, look at their drafts and compare them to the Kings. You know, sure, they've got Ayton. They should have Luka. And that's one of like 6 different draft picks where you just looked at it and said, I cannot believe you drafted that guy over this guy. Their drafts are equally
have
more.
And they're about to get rid of Jaden Smith.
Yeah. They, instead of Halliburton, who would have been a perfect player to be their third guard and to train behind Chris Paul, instead of that, you got a guy who's basically, you didn't pick up his 3rd-year option. That's just crazy.
So, but they landed Booker, and for my money,
Booker, well, like the 13th pick, right?
Most importantly, they landed Monty Williams. I know Kenny will push back about that, but they landed Monty Williams. They landed Devin Booker, which I think those 2 things appealed to Chris Paul. That and thus you have an organization that was an absolute disaster turn itself around. Tom Thibodeau, you know, goes to the New York Knicks, and it's literally the perfect team for Tom Thibodeau. Like he can't, Tibbs just can't walk into any locker room and coach that team. It won't work. The makeup of that roster worked perfectly for Tibbs and the New York Knicks. And we're just waiting for that one thing. Just, you talk about all the little misses. What's the one right thing that sends, like, just as all those little misses leads to year after year after year, one right thing can turn it around, like we saw with Phoenix in New York. Because one right thing, just as one bad thing leads to another, one right thing could lead to another.
No, I totally agree. And at some point it took, you know, again, like Sarver is a nightmare of an owner there in Phoenix, but
I've read.
But if I'm not mistaken, it was him who said, who gave like the thumbs up to take on a 35-year-old Chris Paul with like $90 million left on his contract. And then he opted out and they extended. I mean, that commitment that it does take some, like, it's not just one piece that happened. And like I've said this to you guys before, Monty Williams is the same coach that should not have been invited to the bubble. Like his team was so incredibly bad. They should not have even been invited to the bubble. They went 8-0 in the bubble and still didn't make the postseason. They didn't make the play-in. That tells you how bad that team didn't make the 10th spot, and they went 8-0 in the bubble because they were so bad before that. So like we have to look at all of these things as like little tiny pieces to a puzzle that ends up looking really, really bad for the Kings. But
does Vlade get fired? We've established Vlade doesn't get fired without the bubble. Does Chris go to Phoenix if the 8-0 doesn't happen?
Probably not.
I don't think so.
I don't know. I mean, it's a good question.
Phoenix, but
I mean, his tie with Monty was really, really close from their time with the Pelicans. So, you just don't know. I mean, it's sad because like there are so many times where it didn't have to be this way, but it's gonna be that way when that's what we talk about. Like, there's one thing you have to find, the one thing that you keep doing wrong behind the scenes. And I mean, I do have my opinion on it, and I'm not pointing fingers at one specific person. There is one thing that is missing, that is lacking, that has hurt this franchise for the last 8 years, right? Not just before that. It was that you had, like the broke Maloofs. That's what you had. So, my first 2 seasons covering this team, they had the lowest payroll in the NBA. They had to trade for players at the trade deadline just to get to the salary floor because you got fined at that point. You just get to a $58 million salary. Like, we're not even like how long we're like 8 years later, and Vivek's out there paying $130 million for this roster, like 80 million or 70 million more than what the Maloofs were paying for their roster. So it's not that he doesn't invest the money, and it's not that he's just the worst owner in sports, because I mean, clearly there are worst owners. We're seeing them play out all the time, but it's weird how two owners that in the NBA that really do get hit for being like not great dudes in Sarver and then Dolan, they've figured out ways to get through to somehow make it back where the Kings haven't. And again, I'm not putting it on Vivek. There are plenty of other people out there, but there's some idea that's missing behind the scenes that's causing this mistake. And I'd love to tell you that I know exactly what it is. I have a good idea what it is, but there is no exact.
I sure as hell was going to ask. I was like, this is a great buildup, and I can't tell if James is going to pay it off or not.
I will tell you this. I think one of the problems is that they have a tendency to look for people that don't have pure motives, and they don't have an ability to spot somebody with impure motives. And so while I think the current, this is not a dig on Monty McNair or Luke Walton, I think both of them have pure motives. And I don't think it's a flaw in what they're looking for, who they're looking for to fill spots. They don't see Littlefinger. You know who Littlefinger is from Game of Thrones? They don't see the guy who whispers in the ear of the king. They don't see that guy when he gets in the door. And until they figure out how to stop the meddlesome things that happen, the people that put doubt in somebody else, until they figure out how to root that out, then I think that they will perpetually have situations like this where you have ownership or you have management, or like there is no clear hierarchy. Like, these situations are not what like the San Antonio Spurs have. The hierarchy of the San Antonio Spurs. Every single opposing general manager, coach, everyone knows the hierarchy inside. That's where I see that there's that one thing, is that you have to be able to see people that you let in the door that are there to rise, that are there to unfortunately cause some sort of havoc, even if they don't come in with a pure motive. It goes back to, I'm a history guy, what is it? Ultimate power corrupts ultimately. And so when you give someone a taste of power, how do they handle that? And so many people come in the door, they get a taste of power, and they grab and grab and grab so much more until you notice it. And then by that point, it's too late. And at that point, it's too late. And spectacular human beings like Pete Youngman are no longer in your franchise. That's what you're looking for. And that's the one thing that I will point to, that from an outsider looking in, and from someone who has plenty of information and talks to plenty of people, that's always been the sort of the weak link that I see.
Shout out Pete the trainer, who's always rocking with you.
Always
amazing
trainer. Yeah, great dude. All right.
That's some serious stuff.
It's not the most fun conversation we've ever had.
Let me get back to the 2021-22 Sacramento Kings and tonight, and where this team is. I've been saying a number of different times, and I think, James, you're on the opposing side here, but I'd like to hear your take. Been saying since they got on the plane to go to San Antonio, would love 4-0. They should do 3-1. Absolutely. I said 2-2 is not a failure the way other people say it is, because to me, 2-2 is about what a 500 team will do. Like a team that is 500, which would kind of hope the Kings are around. they're not just going to run roughshod over the bad teams and then split with the good teams. That's what an above 500 team does. A 500 team is going to have some San Antonio games or lose some games that they probably should win, and then go against the Pistons and beat the hell out of them. Like, they get out of this 2-2, they come back home 7-8. It's around a 500 team, par for the course. Do you kind of feel the same way about coming out of this 2-2?
I said it very clearly in the beginning. I thought anything less than 3-1 was a huge disappointment. And I'm going to stand by that. But here's what I'm also going to say. Just because they're playing Minnesota does not mean that they're going to win a game and come back 2-2. And so by losing 2 games against teams that you coulda, shoulda, woulda beat, you set yourself up for a situation where disaster can happen, where 1-3 is disaster. Because you look at this 4-game set with the rest of your schedule, and this was a point to take advantage of. This was a 4-game set where you needed to pick up wins, because there's going to be other 4-game sets where you don't have a shot to win. There's going to be back-to-backs that are crazy. There's going to be, like incredibly hot teams that come in. There's nothing you can do. So if you don't take advantage of these situations, then you're in trouble. And if you blow these situations, which they still have the potential to blow this, like if we're talking that they're 2-1 right now coming into tonight's game, and if they lose, they come back 2-2, that's one thing, but that's not what we're talking about. They have to beat a team to come back 2-2. And that's not a good situation to be in, because if you don't win, and this team seems to not be able to step up for the moment, if they don't step up in this moment and beat a dangerous team with all kinds of weapons, if they don't do it, then what's next? What does that mean going forward? And then you look at their schedule and you're like, oh boy, like where do you start picking up the wins that you should have got that 1 week? Because now we're looking at 2 of them, not just 1. You're looking at 2 wins that you need to make up for. And that's where, you're right. Maybe they are a 500 team, but they haven't been 500 for 15 years. And we keep saying, well, maybe they're just a 500 team. Well, they haven't been one. Yeah. Well, like, what would make you think this is a 500 team? Because they're 500 through 10 games? Well, that's not the way this thing works.
Well, they'll be, and the wording is important. It's at around 500 team. I think that's about what they could be, 1 or 2 above, 1 or 2 below. They win tonight.
You had them at 42, James, right?
Yep.
And Sean had them at 37 or ish. I had them at a hope and prayer at 41. Casey, where were you again?
I was probably
50.
Did he?
I was probably around anywhere between 40 and 42.
Okay.
I think they'd be around 500.
I think they can still be a 42-win team. But I always say this: if they let the drama in, then they have no shot. They have no shot, because that means that the last.
Is that what they did this week?
Well, no, because they haven't pulled the trigger.
Okay.
I think they're fending off the drama. And again, the Marvin Bagley thing is not drama for this team. I mean, that's like child's play for this franchise. So, but the deal is, why I always give like this buffer is because if there's drama and you fall out early, the last 10 to 15 games means that it's nothing but Damian Jones, Chimezi Metu, Luke King,
Mias Queta,
and the Jamias Ramsey, that we're going to see that in the last 15 games of the season. And that's where you go from being the potential for a 42-win team down to a potential for a 32-win team very quickly, because you don't have anything to play for in the final 10 games of the season, 15 games of the season.
Goodness. James, you got work to do. We got to let you go. Luke Walton's going to be talking pretty soon. We appreciate you, my friend. We'll see you Friday.
I'll be here.
Unless you want to jump on with Rick Ross tomorrow, then we can.
Yeah, if I knew who Rick Ross, no, I know.
That's fine. You can watch on YouTube. James, thanks, buddy.
Appreciate you, James.
Take care, guys.
All right.